Coffee is for leaders.
That's pretty scary. And then you talk about AI, that just adds to it, because that's like if you have a language model, kind of a bad actor language model you could theoretically create, that could actually say, well, all this stuff doesn't work. Don't start there. Here's the things to go try. And it could help you learn how to be an expert hacker fast. And that's scary. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with today.
Barry, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're the CEO of Forescout. What you're working on is something that I believe is critical and maybe one of the most important things in the world right now. Tell us about Forescout and how you became CEO.
So a little bit about Forescout. Forescout's been around for about 23 years, and really sort of got the growth started when it created a category called network access control. And that was basically someone tries to connect to a network, Forescout would look, do you have the right credentials? Should you be here? And if you shouldn't, maybe you block it and say no. Or if it's like case of, say, it's like Starbucks and you're in Starbucks, who's a customer of ours, Starbucks in the coffee shop logging in, maybe you put them down a network segment that's just for people who are logging at the coffee shop versus the corporate network. So that was really what started the company. And as we started propelling and growing, I got excited about Forescout because of the capabilities to not only look at and protect for traditional devices like a PC or a phone or something like that, for unmanageable devices like IoT devices or OT devices. You can think of it as a camera or a TV that's in your conference room. So also the unmanageable devices like OT and IoT devices, you can think of whether it's hospital devices that need to be connected, and it's devices that can't maybe have software to manage them. And so we have technology that can use a network approach to help manage and secure those kinds of devices in not only public and private networks. So it's pretty exciting. And how I got the job was I was working at Crosspoint Capital. It's a private equity firm that was a major investor in Forescout. And I was working for about 6 months and had a good vision match in terms of the skill sets and things. And I took over as CEO.
That's incredible. I want to talk to you a little bit about private equity and how that whole world works, which I think is really interesting. But what were you doing prior to Forescout and prior to joining the private equity firm?
Yeah, so I spent previous about 18 years in security. So I worked at Malwarebytes, which was endpoint security. I worked at Mobile Iron, ran Mobile Iron, CEO there, and that's mobile security. And then I worked at Wind River Systems for 10 years, which is functional security. So we would secure IoT or OT devices. And so we built an operating system and a bunch of middleware to do functional security for the avionics of an aircraft, or for, industrial robots, like building things where, we would provide a level of security so that, you wouldn't harm man or machine if they were working. So it really gave me a good understanding of what cybersecurity really was in all the aspects, and the just, better, kind of lucky than good as OT and IoT, and we can talk more about why, but OT and IoT became more important for cybersecurity. My background at Wind River was just a good vision match for where Forescout was going, and then, what I knew. So it was really, it was good. It was a nice match on both skill sets and kind of vision.
Tell us about the threats that are out there now. It feels like it's more unsafe than ever. Is that accurate, or is that not accurate? And does AI change any of that? Kind of a loaded question, but
yeah, it's a loaded question. So we have a lab called Videri Labs. It's in the Netherlands, and we track exploits. What kind of attacks, to your exact question. And we've seen over the last year and a half a huge rise in unmanaged devices. So we can talk about whether it's escalators, it could be private communication systems, like things that would be on a train, where you have a communication system with that and the tracks and the, all of the infrastructure for a train. Could be, like I mentioned before, robotics, could be automobiles, this kind of stuff. And we're seeing a big sort of increase a year and a half ago of those cyber attacks and those actually being successful. And, we do know, and I don't think this is any new news that the new sort of battleground is critical infrastructure. It's been mentioned by our government, and we've spent so much money, kind of securing traditional devices that the bad actors are saying, let's go after maybe some of this stuff that's been sitting out there for 20 years. And we made it smart and didn't really kind of think about what would happen in the future. And there's also this interesting thing that has happened is the bad actors are crowdsourcing how they exploit something. And so, for example, the recent hacks, you see the Salt Typhoon and Vault Typhoon, they've been in the news, were not only were they, sort of based from one of our, from China, but the data shows that they were also crowdsourced, meaning like, hey, how would they, and could you get a bunch of people using open source kind of thought to hack these kinds of things? It's scary. And so you can get thousands of people working on how would I exploit this thing? Or how would I've got this problem. What do you think? And so that's pretty scary. And then you talk about AI, that just adds to it, because that's like, if you have a language model, kind of a bad actor language model, you could theoretically create, that could actually say, well, all this stuff doesn't work. Don't start there. Here's the things to go try. And it could help you learn how to be an expert hacker fast. And that's scary. And so that's kind of what we're dealing with today. And again, go after the critical infrastructure. It makes it even more scary, more vulnerable, to be fair.
Can you give us a sense of the scale of the threat and just how many billions of dollars are lost to this type of stuff and spent on this type of stuff every year?
Yeah. So, I think if you kind of, rewind the video back a few years, it was really around the ransomware. Hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to, breach your network, put something in there and say, hey, if you want me to unlock all your files, you got to go give me money. Mm-hmm. And we see that transitioning. Whilst we still see that there, we're starting to see things like a Vault Typhoon or Salt Typhoon, where they're hacking into critical infrastructure like our phone network and our mobile phone network, placing software that goes in and allows whoever it is to have access to information. And it's transitioned. Yes, while we still have our, ransomware, we're starting to see, from, call it, a certain set of countries and coming into the US, whether it's hacktivism, maybe like we've seen some of this stuff, which is different, where when October 7th happened in Israel, the situation there with Palestine, and then the reaction that happened after that, many of the folks that were not on the side of the Israelis would go and say, well, maybe what we'll do is we will attack some of the technology that Israel has developed and supply it around the world as a way to say that's more by hacktivism. And we're seeing these bad actors. They're not just in one country. They're in many countries with the same ideology trying to do something. So it almost mirrors a little bit about some of the politics in some sense about this stuff, but they're going after critical infrastructure. And I'm not at liberty to give some of the examples, but I think sure. you can see some of the things that we've had with, whether it's been drawbridges or some of the critical power infrastructure, that kind of thing.
Well, and the bad actors are not just kind of rogue actors. They're also states, right? They're governments.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And there's, 5 of them that tend to be showing up all the time.
Yeah. As you think about, I want to go double click on AI because I think it's really interesting, obviously, how it's changing everything, but in particular, your industry. How are you thinking about it? How are you using it? And how are you preparing for this wave?
Yeah. So on the, now we move into a positive note here. I'm going to bum everybody out from that with the conversation here. But one of the things that we're announcing here, which I'm super excited about, which is to leverage AI for the analysts that are using our software. And one of the things that people always complain about is, if you look at the industry and, for our customers, the people that are working either in the SOC or Security Operations Center, it's tough to get people, high burnout job. It's go, 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 go. And, we sell to, mostly regulated industries in the government. So banking, brokerage, insurance, manufacturing, energy, these kinds of things. And so typically if something happens, it's not great, right? And so they're stressed. And one of the things we thought about is, and my philosophy is, I think if you sit where the money changes hands, you find amazing, amazing opportunities, and we found from our customers, they said, hey, if you could provide something, think of a language model and some smarts that could come back and say, here's all the alerts for, you're looking at based on what you've done in the past, or based on what we think here, or based on what other people have leveraged. Here's where you should start. Give you prioritization. And that's really helped our customers in our beta. They're jazzed about it. And that's a great way where a language model can help you be more efficient and help you look versus, spending half hour, 40 minutes trying to, because you're firefighting and these folks, now I got to look at the console. What should I do? It's coming back constantly. Here are the priorities. Here are the priorities. I've used this, like that. And that's been great. We don't do control right now. So we don't say, given that, go do this. Because some of the infrastructures or some of the implementations, we wouldn't want a manufacturing plant shut down. I'll let the user shut the manufacturing plant if they want to, but let them have the kind of end decision on that for control. So that's been a really, really good way of leveraging it. We're also spending some time with a lot of the critical CVEs that we find, and saying, hey, can we apply some smarts in an application that will tell customers which ones to focus on based on their infrastructure and maybe potentially their risks based on what we see in other like infrastructures or other like hardware. And that's been really useful because that's just more of a, hey, go take a look at this. Do you know about this? Or have you checked this? And again, we don't do control. Maybe that's at some point we could, but that's been great. And so we're in beta, about to announce that coming up, and super excited about that because, when you look in the eyes of your customers or your users and they're really excited, this is one thing that's been really helpful. So I think this is going to be a big thing for our customers. And
what does a typical day look like for you as CEO of this company?
Oh God, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I think for challenge for anyone, we're 1,100 employees and north of 350 million in revenue. And I try and make sure that I manage my day. I always start off with, hey, let's take a look at the day fairly early. What is it I need to accomplish? What can I delegate? I also do a few little tricks, like I don't do full hour meetings. I'll do 50-minute meetings. That way I have 10 minutes, either prep, make sure I'm ready for the next meeting, or make sure I'm not late. Because I think that's disrespectful for people's times and things. So I try and be on time, and make sure if it's a half-hour meeting, it ends at 25. If it's an hour meeting, it's really 50 minutes. I try and manage my time. I also am very around, the metrics and objectives. So I try and say, hey, what objectives are what do I got to do today to match those? And then, I really try and focus my time too on a little bit of thinking time during the day, because there's always something I have got to go and sort out and make a good decision on, and then be able to delegate to people. Then now, last but not least, make a bunch of time. And like today, I've talked to 2 customers. And again, like I said before, you have to be grounded in reality where the money changes hands. Too easy to lose sight of things if you don't. So that's kind of a typical day. I do the interviews too. So, I'm doing this as well today. I don't do it every day, but I try and do something, probably use a couple of weeks, every couple of weeks, I'll do something like this.
Yeah, that's great. That's incredible. It sounds like you're super busy here. How did you land on hybrid, in-person, all remote, that whole debate that we've all gone through and so many companies have gone through? Where did you land, and why did you land on where you landed?
Yeah, so we're hybrid for the most part. We do let some of the locations, because we have our R&D centers around the world, determine a little bit. Like in India, for example, not everybody is super close. I don't know if you've been to India, but it can be difficult to travel even a short distance. And the public transportation isn't the best. So it's actually been okay because we can get talent that may not be there. But we're really trying hard on the other sites where we can. People are relatively close to have a 2 to 3 day. And that's worked out really well. I think people are realizing also, hey, having sometimes the QA and developers right there, if there's an issue, right side by side, things just happen more quickly. You don't have communication issues as much because you're looking somebody in the eye, and you can kind of work things, build a little bit better relationship in the 3D environment versus the 2D environment. So we're hybrid. I let the locations do it, but like I said, 2-3 days seems to work out pretty well for the teams.
What do you read? What reading recommendations would you have for the CEO.com community?
Oh God. So I just finished a book called The Alchemist by Pablo Coelho. I don't know if you know that book.
Great book. Great book.
It's a
Yeah.
great book. And so I try and read, a combination of fiction, nonfiction. And I thought that's just a good book to kind of think differently. I think if that you can kind of change the way your point of view is, it helps you solve problems better. And my current book is Never Split the Difference. I don't know if you know that one by, I think it's Chris Voss. And he was an FBI negotiator. So it's really about negotiation and how to do it. The stories in there are phenomenal. And I'm maybe 50 pages through that. And that's a good book. I would recommend it to anyone, and has some good principles in there. At least 50 pages in, but it's good. And I try and read, spend time each day reading something. But those are the two recently finished, and the new one that I'm reading.
How are you thinking about? We're speaking at the very beginning of 2025, early January in 2025. 2024 is a pretty volatile year for all sorts of reasons, right? There's an election, there's economic recessions or close to in certain industries. Certain industries are doing really well. Just kind of an uncertain time period. It does seem like we're a little bit more certain in kind of like what our world is going to look like this year. How are you thinking about 2025 versus 2024?
From what perspective are you talking about? Like just the political perspective, tech perspective? What
and your company, yeah, those and just like how you're managing your company differently, if you are at all.
Yeah, so if I just zoom out, it feels like, and again, this is just one person's point of view, I do get to spend time with governments. I was at the NATO summit, so I get a perspective. And this thing I keep hearing a lot is practical idealism, and that, hey, we want to make sure that we're spending time with, people of all sides of the fence and diverse nature, but let's be practical about things, and let's make sure we're thinking about what makes sense and what we can afford and doing the right thing. So there's that, which I think will, kind of help when people thinking about critical infrastructure. Should we, think about whether it's, spending the money on that? It's super important. I feel like companies are looking for a better future just in terms of seeing the economy moving in that direction. This is what I hear, at least. Is it like monumental better? No, but I do feel like it'll 25 will be better. I think there'll be more acquisitions, which, in the tech space, kind of the mergers and acquisitions actually help. Sometimes 1 and 1 equals something way better than 2. And so we feel like that. You can just go look at whether it's IPOs or acquisitions. They were down last year. I think those will go up. There's definitely a heightened interest in cybersecurity. That's not going away. And I think that it's not an if, it's when. And then last but not least, I think some of the things like the Disclosure Act that happened last January, which was to say, hey, you're going to have personal liability if you don't, and there's several things you needed to go do as a CEO, COO, or CFO, that you could have personal liability if you didn't do certain things. And we see that happening around the world with NIS2 and some of the other things. So I feel like there's a lineup between both public and private for the first time. And I just spoke with a couple people with at the NATO summit. It was in it just now follow-up meeting from those meetings, which was about, hey, how do we work better together between private and public, and what do we do? And so that's good. And then the other piece is just, I do feel like AI is maturing a bit, and it's become more advantageous, and we can use it to be more efficient. And I don't want to say do more with less, because it's not like we have less people, but the more I can put hands on keyboards building stuff that, will delight customers versus, hey, that's just something that you should just go do anyway, like QA or something like that, the better it is. So I think we're going to see some advances this year with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You went to the NATO summit. That's going to be a big topic this year, right? NATO is going to be a very big topic.
Yeah, that's true.
which will be interesting, and I'm sure it'll all work out. Who knows? But yeah, that's going to be a very interesting topic. What are like some products, some things, some apps, things that you use every single day that you could never live without?
Oh God, my phone. The myriad of apps. I got an iPhone. The myriad of apps on the phone. Although I sort of forced myself to use a Android for a while to go in, just to learn both sides of the fence. But my phone, and I use also, I think it's important, is the little side thing. Part of the thing I do for just my mental health is working out. So some of the interesting applications that are in and around being able to track your vitals, whether it's your heart rate or, your recovery rates and things like that blood pressure and everything, to say, hey, are you stressed out? Are you recovering? Do you need more sleep? So kind of like biohacking, myself a little bit. And so there's a bunch of apps that I use for that. Look, email and text, I think I turned off, you can have on Apple, it's like how much time you're spending on, different kinds of apps, or how much time you spend, connected. Microsoft, same thing. I turned all that off because it was scaring the hell out of me when I'd see, you spent X number of hours doing this. I'm like, so I did turn that off because I think that's just a angst thing. I stopped looking at a lot of social media and reels and stuff.
That's healthy.
I mean, LinkedIn is probably the only one that I look at a lot all the time. I just don't, just because the other ones I think has, you waste time. I think not that if people use them and don't waste time, but just for me, it was, I think do other things like, spend time with my family, or, hey, I could go and, spend time reading a book. Cause you're looking at reels and all of a sudden you turn around and you're like, that's an hour. So I went away from that. And so I think I went from, although it's still digital, I use a Kindle, but it's still digital, but I call that the analog, a book. Try and force myself. And this year, one of my resolutions was, be more analog. So books, have a conversation with people, reach out, maybe use less text and more phone.
I love it. Yeah, that is incredible. And I wonder, like, as you were saying that, and you have a team of like 1,100, is that what you said?
Yeah.
100 folks. And during COVID, so many leaders were dealing with like a mental health crisis within their employee base, themselves. I mean, and it seems like it's still a little bit ongoing. How have you managed that? How have you thought about that? How are you approaching that issue that it seems like every leader is being confronted with?
Yeah, it's a really good, I mean, it was tougher during the pandemic because, and then post-pandemic, like right post-pandemic, right? So we could see it in our healthcare charge. I mean, they don't tell you whom, but we'd see it was up by 125%. People going and having health, mental health related, sort of engagements with our medical, our Medcare. So, I think there's a few things. One, I think it's important for people to go spend time with people. And there's a lot of research that shows that some of the angst at work is about confrontation. And I think that if you can have confrontation and it's constructive and have a face-to-face, you feel way better after. And there's so much research on, God, I feel so much better. I even tell my kids, hey, I have an issue at work. I said, have a conversation with them. Go meet them. And then, they'll say, sky is falling. And afterwards, wow, he was really nice, or she was nice. Hey, we got through this. So have that constructive confrontation, because typically that was a big push for some of the anxiety and stuff. The other piece is about reach out to people. Hey, how you doing? And I only say this, I don't say halfway joking, but I say it because it's honest. I say, hey, this is a health and welfare check. What's going on? Reach out to your employees. I did it earlier today. And you could just tell because this person was stressed out. He said, hey, it's a health and wellness check or health and welfare check. What's going on?
Yeah.
And I think the human element, and we push so hard for our leaders to say, have a human element, have a lunch with your team, make sure you invite them in once a month so that you're having conversations. Do the kinds of stuff that we as humans like a lot. Sometimes it's easier to stay home, but once we go to a party, even introverts, you go to a party, come back, hey, that wasn't so bad. And I think that human element helped us through some of the anxiety, and, we're seeing it. So that, and then we have varying, sort of things that we try and do from an HR perspective, whether it's like September, hey, get out there and do some walk, and, you can kind of post things. And we had a bunch of internal fun things that go on. But, I do feel like that human element, I think as, a species, we need to have that interaction. And the less you have, the harder it is. And you can see it with even kids that, during the pandemic when they didn't go to school, how difficult it was. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, pushing for some of what maybe we knew a lot before, and just go back to some of the things we did before, like have a conversation if you're having an issue with somebody. It's hard. We'll give you some tools. Here's how you start that conversation. That's the one thing. The one thing when we talk to our employees, let's give you this, was how do you start that conversation? Like if I had a problem with you, like what and so we have this little tool. It's like, I'm just seeking to understand. Here's the kind of email I got. What does that mean? And just that little thing, right? Look for some of those things. So anyway, I always think that there's sometimes start with the simple things that kind of help out, and, engaging, and some tools that people could use were really helpful.
Finally, at CEO.com, we believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
Oh, God. I would say my Ken Klein. So he was my boss at 2 companies, and he, hired me to go work at Wind River. And, I told him, I said, hey, I want to be a CEO. And he said, okay, great. Well, here are some things you need to go do. And you have talent. Here's what I need. Hey, you need, I come from a liberal arts, background. So I think I'm the only, I don't even want to admit that, but I think I'm the only person I know that had a liberal arts background and, was running a cybersecurity company. But he said, hey, I need you to go take a week-long class, which is, finance for non-financial executives. And I did that. I did it at Columbia University, and he invested in me. He said, hey, you don't know what's stamped on your own forehead. Here's what you should do. And, I think you should be a CEO. So I would say Ken gave me that chance, and, I'll never forget it.
Barry, thank you so much for coming on. Best of luck in everything you're doing in the new year. It's super exciting, and it's very important what you're doing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.